My name is Nora Townsend. I am 29 years old. 3 days before New Year's Eve, my family called to tell me not to come. "You'll just make everyone uncomfortable," my mother said. Her voice was calm, polished, final. The same tone she used when declining charity requests or negotiating contracts. Not cruel, worse, certain. So on December 31st, I sat alone in my studio apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts. 500 square feet, one window, one small table pressed against the wall. Outside, I watched strangers gather in the street, couples laughing, friends hugging, champagne bottles popping early. 2 hours south, my family raised crystal glasses in their Greenwich mansion, celebrating without me. At exactly 12:01 a.m., my phone rang. "Ryan." My brother's voice was shaking. "Nora, what did you do?" I didn't answer. "Dad just saw the news. He's not breathing right. Mom is screaming. What the hell did you do?" The news he was talking about wasn't the money. It wasn't the IPO announcement that went live at midnight. It wasn't the fact that Neural Thread, Inc. had just gone public at a $2.1 billion valuation, making me one of the youngest female tech billionaires in the country. The shock was the truth. The Forbes interview published at the exact same moment. 3 years of emails, patent filings, audio recordings, proof that my brother had tried to steal my work and erase my name. Before I tell you what happened after that phone call, you need to understand how we got here. I didn't grow up wealthy. I grew up legacy wealthy. The kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. Old money from Greenwich, Connecticut. 40-year-old medical device company. Mansion with white columns and real staff. Dinners where children learned which fork to use before they learned algebra. My brother Ryan was born for that world. 5 years older than me, tall, effortlessly charming, the kind of person who could make you feel important within 30 seconds of meeting him. He wore Tom Ford suits like they were casual wear. He played golf with investors. He laughed easily. He belonged. From the moment he was old enough to talk, everyone knew he would inherit the company. I was different. I liked code more than conversation. I preferred problem sets to parties. I didn't hate people. I just didn't perform for them. When I got into MIT for computer science, my parents smiled for the photos. Later, I overheard my mother tell a friend, "It's a phase. She'll grow out of it and do something more practical." I didn't grow out of it. I graduated top of my class, focused on AI-driven medical diagnostics. My parents didn't attend the ceremony. They were at Ryan's charity golf tournament. "Ryan needs us there for networking," my mother said. "You understand." I always understood. I understood when I moved into a tiny Cambridge apartment with roommates, while Ryan bought a penthouse in Back Bay. I understood when family dinners became strategy meetings about quarterly projections and acquisitions, and I sat quietly, pushing food around a Wedgwood plate. I understood when my father introduced Ryan as the future of the company and introduced me as our daughter who does computers. What I didn't understand, at least not yet, was how little I mattered. In March 2022, everything changed. I was working on something that wasn't just promising, it was revolutionary. My 2 co-founders and I had developed an algorithm capable of analyzing medical imaging data faster and more accurately than existing systems. Early detection for diseases doctors often caught too late. We called it Neural Thread because it connected neural networks in a way no one had done before. Investor meetings were scheduled. Beta testing was months away. Everything was aligning. Then my mother called. "Nora, we need to talk about Ryan." That edge in her voice meant this wasn't optional. "Towns and Industries is going through a difficult quarter," she said. "Your brother is under enormous pressure. You need to help." I told her I was in the middle of critical development, that my startup was fragile. "Startup," she said, like the word tasted unpleasant. "Startups are for people with nothing to lose. You have a legacy. Ryan needs support, and you're sitting in that little apartment playing with computers." Playing. That's when I did something my mother never taught me to do. I protected myself. Before agreeing to anything, I met with an intellectual property lawyer named James Kirby. We sat in a small bakery in Cambridge. He walked me through patent filings, timestamps, documentation. "If anyone tries to claim your work," he said, sliding papers toward me, "this protects you." I filed the patent on March 15, 2022. Every line of code, every iteration, legally mine. Then I agreed to consult for Ryan. Family obligation, my mother called it. Ryan greeted me at headquarters like we were close. We were. He nodded enthusiastically as I explained high-level concepts. Not the core algorithm, just enough to show potential. He took notes. He smiled. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back of a boardroom while Ryan presented my ideas as his own. Towns and Industries is pioneering AI-driven diagnostics, he said, clicking through slides I had never seen before. An investor glanced at me. "And you are?" "My sister Nora," Ryan said smoothly. "She's been helping with some technical research." Helping. After the meeting, he handed me an NDA. "Standard," he said, "to protect the family business." I signed it because I still believed family meant something. By Thanksgiving 2023, I knew better. At dinner, my mother introduced Ryan as CEO. Applause, pride. Then she introduced me. "Nora works in technology," she said. "She's very bright, but not much for socializing." Ryan laughed and added, "She's brilliant with computers, not great with people." Polite laughter followed. I stared at my plate and didn't eat. In June 2024, Ryan finally said it out loud. "We need the full algorithm," he said. "Investors are pulling back. This could save the company." "That's my startup," I said. He laughed. "You signed an NDA. Everything you worked on belongs to the company." "That's not how NDAs work." My mother entered the room like she had been waiting. "Family doesn't sue family," she said. "Give Ryan the algorithm." I said no. I recorded the conversation. After that, I disappeared. No invitations, no calls, just Instagram photos of family gatherings I wasn't part of. When I finally asked my father why, he said, "Maybe give everyone some space." Space from what? On December 20, my mother officially uninvited me from Christmas. "You make people uncomfortable," she said. 10 days later, she uninvited me from New Year's Eve. "Don't come," she said, "for everyone's sake." So I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop. The Forbes email waited in my inbox. They wanted to tell my story, all of it. I said yes. At midnight, the article went live. At 12:01 a.m., Ryan called. I answered. "I went public," I said. He screamed, he accused, he denied. Then he hung up. My mother called next. "You've destroyed us," she said. "No," I replied. "You did that when you erased me." I hung up. What happened next didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure, the truth spreading faster than I could process. Ryan held a press conference and melted down on camera. The board suspended him. Investors pulled out. Evidence surfaced that he had tried to sell my algorithm to outside firms. He resigned. My father apologized. My mother demanded a retraction. I refused. I spoke publicly. I documented everything. And something unexpected happened. Women wrote to me. Hundreds, then thousands. Engineers, students, founders, daughters who had been told to shrink, to be quieter, to stop making people uncomfortable. They told me my story gave them permission to exist. I spoke at a gala in Boston in front of 1,200 women. "For most of my life," I said, "I thought I was the problem. I wasn't uncomfortable. I was unseen." They stood, they clapped, some cried. So did I. I moved to San Francisco. I built my company. I surrounded myself with people who didn't confuse charm with value. I don't know what my family will become, but I know what I am now. I am no longer the daughter who does computers. I am the woman who refused to de-journalists disappear. I thought telling the truth would end the story. I was wrong. The morning after the article went live, my phone didn't stop vibrating. Emails, missed calls, voicemails stacked on top of each other like debris after an explosion. Investors I had never met, pretending they wanted clarity. Distant relatives suddenly concerned about my well-being. And my family. My father left 12 voicemails, each one shorter than the last. Call me. We need to talk. This has gone too far. The final one was different. Your mother hasn't slept. That sentence was supposed to break me. It almost did, not because I felt guilty, but because I realized how deeply trained I was to prioritize her comfort over my survival. I didn't call back. Instead, I went to the office. Neural Thread had moved out of borrowed co-working space and into a real building 2 weeks before the IPO. Glass walls, whiteboards covered in equations. Engineers hunched over monitors, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. When I walked in, the room went quiet. Not awkward, not tense. Respectful. Maya, my CTO, was the first to speak. You okay? I nodded. I am now. She smiled. Good, because the servers are on fire. It was the best possible distraction. By noon, our legal team confirmed what we already knew. Ryan's NDA was meaningless against my patent filings. His attempt to claim ownership had left a trail so obvious it bordered on arrogance. Legacy entitlement, our lawyer said. It makes people sloppy. At 3:17 p.m., the call came from Greenwich. I almost didn't answer. This is your father, he said. His voice sounded older than I remembered, smaller. I know, I replied. There was a pause. I imagined him standing in his study, surrounded by shelves of awards and framed photos where Ryan always stood in the center. You blindsided us, he said. No, I said quietly. You ignored me. He exhaled slowly. Your mother feels betrayed. I felt erased. Another pause, longer this time. We built this family, he said. Everything we did was to protect it. You protected Ryan, I said. You asked me to disappear so he could shine. He didn't deny it. What do you want? He finally asked. I looked around my office, at the people who chose to be there, at the future I had built without permission. I want you to stop calling me a phase, I said, and stop asking me to be small so someone else can feel big. He whispered my name, like he used to when I was a child and had nightmares. I don't know how to fix this, he said. That's okay, I replied. It's not my job anymore. I hung up before he could respond. The backlash was immediate. Opinion pieces questioned my loyalty. Anonymous sources described me as difficult, cold, ungrateful. Someone leaked a story claiming I had manipulated my brother. I didn't respond. I let the documents speak. Emails with timestamps, audio recordings, signed contracts. The narrative collapsed under its own weight. 2 weeks later, Ryan was formally charged with corporate fraud. The night the news broke, my mother showed up at my apartment. No warning, no call. I opened the door and found her standing there, impeccably dressed, eyes rimmed red, posture rigid like armor. You humiliated us, she said. You taught me how, I replied. She flinched. I gave you everything, she said. Education, opportunity, security. You gave me conditions, I said. Be quiet, be useful, don't outshine your brother. Her voice cracked. He needed us. So did I. Silence filled the room, heavy and unfamiliar. She looked around my apartment. The books, the plants, the framed patent on the wall. You could have handled this privately, she said. I tried, I said. You told me not to make people uncomfortable. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly. You always were dramatic, she muttered, almost reflexively. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. You don't get to define me anymore, I said. You lost that privilege. She left without another word. Months passed. Neural thread expanded into 3 hospitals, then 10. Our technology caught early-stage tumors other systems missed. Real people lived longer because of it. Every success felt surreal. I testified in court. I answered questions calmly. Ryan never once looked at me. When the verdict came down, I felt nothing. No triumph, no relief. Just distance. I stopped waiting for closure from people who had benefited from my silence. Instead, I built community. I mentored young engineers. I funded scholarships for women in STEM. I spoke openly about systemic erasure disguised as family loyalty. And slowly, the narrative shifted. Not revenge. Recognition. On my 30th birthday, I didn't throw a party. I flew to the coast alone. I walked along the water at sunrise and watched the horizon glow. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was catching up. I was exactly where I belonged. People still ask if I regret it, if I wish I had stayed quiet, if the cost was too high. I tell them the truth. Silence almost cost me my life. Speaking cost me my illusion. I choose the second one every time. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, in quiet moments that surprised me. Like the first time I introduced myself at a conference and no one asked whose daughter I was. Or when an investor looked directly at me instead of searching the room for a man to confirm my words. Or when I realized I no longer rehearsed my sentences before speaking. That was new. For years, my voice had lived inside my head, carefully edited, softened, trimmed so it wouldn't provoke discomfort. Now it moved freely. Sometimes it shook, sometimes it cut sharply, but it was mine. Neural thread became profitable faster than anyone predicted. Hospitals requested custom integrations. Universities asked for partnerships. Governments asked questions. Real ones, not performative curiosity. I said yes selectively. Power, I learned, isn't about access. It's about boundaries. One afternoon, an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. Ryan. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. He called again the next day, then sent a text. I just want to talk. I didn't reply. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, sloppy, nothing like the polished emails he used to send investors. I don't expect forgiveness, it read, but I need you to know I never thought you'd fight back. That sentence told me everything. He hadn't mistaken me for weak. He had mistaken me for obedient. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not as evidence, as a reminder. Around that time, my mother stopped calling entirely. At first, the silence felt like punishment. Then it felt like relief. Then it felt like grief for something that had never existed. I mourned the version of her who could have been proud without conditions. The mother who might have said my name without calculating its impact. Grief doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes it comes from clarity. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I was tired of expanded globally, hired aggressively but intentionally. No ego hires, no charm without substance. At Neural Thread, meetings were quiet but intense. Ideas mattered more than volume. Credit was shared visibly. No one disappeared in the margins. I made that rule explicit. One evening, after a 16-hour workday, I sat alone in the office and watched the city lights flicker on. San Francisco hummed beneath the windows, alive, unapologetic. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who pushed food around her plate at family dinners, the one who learned early that excellence was acceptable only if it didn't threaten hierarchy. I wished I could tell her this. You are not too much. You are too honest for people who benefit from your silence. The emails never stopped. Some were angry, some were grateful, some were desperate. One message stayed with me. I didn't know I was allowed to say no until I heard you say it out loud. I printed that email and taped it inside my notebook. not as motivation, as responsibility. Success, I realized, doesn't erase the past. It reframes it. It turns pain into proof. On a quiet Sunday morning, my father emailed me. No accusations, no demands. Just one line. I should have protected you too. I stared at the words for a long time. I didn't reply immediately. When I did, I wrote back carefully. I protected myself when no one else would. That has to be enough. He didn't respond, but he stopped defending Ryan publicly after that. It wasn't reconciliation. It was acknowledgement. And that mattered more than apology. People love neat endings, forgiveness arcs, family reunions framed by soft music and shared understanding. This wasn't that story. This was the story of a woman who stopped waiting. I no longer measure my worth by who claps the loudest. I measure it by impact, by integrity, by the quiet certainty that I didn't betray myself. The world still tries to label me. Difficult, cold, ambitious. I let them. Those words once scared me. Now they sound like freedom. I didn't rise by stepping on others. I rose by refusing to stay where I was placed. And I am not done. The strangest part of rebuilding my life was learning how to rest. Not sleep. Not vacations, rest. The kind where your body isn't bracing for the next dismissal. The kind where silence doesn't feel like rejection. The kind where success doesn't come with the constant fear of being taken away. For years, my nervous system had been tuned to survival. Achievement was my shield. Productivity was my proof of worth. If I slowed down, I felt exposed. So I learned slowly. I stopped answering emails after midnight. I stopped explaining my decisions to people who weren't affected by them. I stopped over-preparing for meetings where my competence had already been established. And the world didn't collapse. Neural thread continued to grow. In fact, it grew better. When fear left the room, clarity stayed. We declined a major acquisition offer that would have made headlines but compromised patient data. Investors pushed back. Advisors warned me. This could make you untouchable, one of them said. I don't want to be untouchable, I replied. I want to be ethical. That answer cost us money. It earned us trust. A year later, that trust became our strongest asset. One afternoon, while reviewing a clinical trial report, I caught my reflection in the darkened screen. I barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked powerful, but because she looked calm. That was new. Power, I realized, had been loud in my childhood. It raised voices. It filled rooms. It demanded attention. This version was quiet, precise, unmoved by approval or threat. Around that time, a university invited me to speak to a group of graduating engineers. I almost declined. Public speaking still made my chest tighten. But I accepted. Standing at the podium, I scanned the audience. Faces full of ambition, anxiety, hope. I saw myself in them. I was taught that talent should be hidden if it disrupts the order of things, I said, especially if it belongs to the wrong person. The room went still. If you're waiting for permission to take up space, I continued, you may never receive it. Some systems survive by convincing you that your absence is harmony. After the talk, a young woman approached me, hands shaking, eyes bright. My family says I'm selfish for choosing my career, she said. They say I'm breaking tradition. I smiled gently. Traditions that require your silence aren't traditions, I said. They're restraints. She cried. I held her hand until she stopped. Moments like that changed me more than any headline. They reminded me why I started. Not to prove anything. To build something that didn't erase people. At night, sometimes, memories still surfaced. My mother's voice, my brother's smile in that boardroom, the laughter that followed his jokes at my expense. But the memories no longer controlled me. They informed me. Pain, when examined honestly, becomes instruction. I learned how power disguises itself as concern, How control wears the costume of care. How love, when conditional, is just another contract. And I learned that walking away isn't failure. It's fluency. Fluency in self-respect. One evening, as I locked up the office, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "I heard you're doing well," a woman's voice said softly. It was my mother. I didn't respond immediately. "I won't stay long," she added quickly. "I just wanted to say I see you." The words landed awkwardly. Too late, too careful, but real. "I'm glad," I said. Silence stretched between us. "I don't know how to talk to you," she admitted. "You don't have to," I replied. "Just don't try to shrink me when you do." She didn't promise anything. Neither did I. When the call ended, I felt neither relief nor pain. Just neutrality. And neutrality, after everything, felt like peace. I've stopped fantasizing about closure scenes, about apologies that arrive perfectly formed, about families transformed by truth. Life doesn't work that way. Growth isn't cinematic. It's cumulative. It's the daily choice to honor yourself even when no one is watching, especially then. I no longer chase validation. I build alignment. Between my values and my actions, between my voice and my presence. That alignment is unshakable. If my story has a lesson, it isn't about revenge or triumph. It's about visibility. The moment you stop making yourself invisible, the world has to adjust. Some people will resist. Some will leave. Some will finally see you. Let them. You were never meant to disappear to keep others comfortable. You were meant to become. After peace came something unexpected. Choice. For most of my life, my decisions had been reactions, adjustments, calculated responses to other people's expectations. Even rebellion had been framed against them, proving, defying, escaping. Now, for the first time, my choices weren't answers to anyone. They were origins. I took a 3-week break and didn't tell the press. No announcement. No well-deserved rest headlines. I rented a small place near the redwoods and let my days lose structure. Mornings without alarms. Meals without urgency. Thoughts that arrived without being summoned. At first, it felt wrong, like I was forgetting something important, like I was about to be reprimanded. But nothing happened. The world kept turning. Neural thread functioned without my constant oversight. My team didn't fall apart. My relevance didn't evaporate. That realization changed me more than any courtroom victory. I wasn't indispensable. And that was freedom. When I returned, I restructured my role. Fewer operational decisions, more long-term vision. I empowered leaders who had earned trust, not attention. Control, I learned, is often fear pretending to be responsibility. As I loosened my grip, something else loosened too. The tightness in my chest. The urge to over-explain. The reflex to justify my existence. I began writing again, not for publication, just for myself. Pages filled with sentences I had never allowed myself to finish before. I am allowed to want more. I am allowed to leave. I am allowed to change my mind. I am allowed to be seen without being consumed. One evening, at a private dinner hosted by industry leaders, a man leaned across the table and said, "You're surprisingly warm, given your reputation." I smiled politely. Your reputation is just the story people tell when they don't have access to your inner life, I said. He didn't know how to respond. That amused me. I stopped correcting people's assumptions. Let them misunderstand. Let them project. Clarity is expensive. I only offer it where it's valued. The invitations changed too. Less spectacle, more substance. Panels about ethics instead of growth hacks. Conversations about responsibility instead of domination. Rooms where listening mattered more than speaking. In those rooms, I met people who weren't impressed by my story. They were interested in my thinking. That felt like home. One night, scrolling through old photos I'd avoided for years, I found a picture of myself at 16, standing slightly behind my family, half smiling, already practiced at not taking up space. I studied her face. She wasn't weak. She was waiting for permission that never came. I whispered aloud, "You didn't fail." I deleted the photo, not out of anger but completion. I didn't need reminders of who I used to be to honor who I'd become. The past stopped chasing me once I stopped running from it. Occasionally, I still get asked if I'll ever reconcile fully. Holidays, birthdays, the hypothetical future everyone thinks is owed to bloodlines. I answer honestly, I don't know. And for once, that uncertainty doesn't scare me. Not all bridges are meant to be rebuilt. Some exist only to teach you how to swim. I trust myself now. That trust is quiet, unflashy, deep. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't require witnesses. It simply is. And from that place, everything I build stands stronger than anything I inherited. Because it's rooted in choice. Not obligation. Not fear. Choice. The future stopped feeling like something I had to outrun. For years, I lived as if time were a judge, every achievement a defense, every pause a risk. I measured my days by output, my value by momentum. That urgency faded. Not because I became less driven, but because I stopped being afraid of falling behind in a race I never agreed to run. Neural thread reached a point of stability that allowed me to ask deeper questions, not about growth, but about direction. What problems were worth solving? Who deserved access? What kind of legacy didn't require someone else's silence? We shifted focus toward underserved hospitals, rural clinics, systems without marketing budgets or political leverage. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast. It mattered. Some investors left. Others leaned in. I stopped chasing alignment with everyone and started honoring it with a few. Around this time, I began to notice how differently people treated me when they realized I wasn't asking for approval. Meetings shortened. Conversations sharpened. Manipulation lost its grip when it stopped finding guilt to latch onto. Power dynamics depend on participation. I withdrew mine. One afternoon, a journalist asked me during an interview, "Do you think your family situation made you who you are?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said. "My response to it did. Trauma doesn't create strength. Choice does." I didn't romanticize my past anymore. I didn't call it destiny or fuel or blessing in disguise. It was simply something that happened. What mattered was what I refused to normalize afterward. I started saying no publicly. No to panels that wanted a token story instead of substance. No to brands that wanted my face without my voice. No to narratives that framed my survival as exceptional instead of necessary. Each no made room for a better yes. In private moments, I noticed how my body had changed. My shoulders rested lower, my jaw unclenched. My laughter came easier without scanning the room for consequences. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was physical. It was waking up without dread. It was forgetting to rehearse. It was trusting silence. I built friendships that didn't require explanation. People who didn't flinch when I spoke plainly, who didn't confuse honesty with hostility. We talked about books, about failure, about the strange grief that comes when you finally stop needing someone who never showed up. No one rushed me to forgive. No one asked me to justify distance. That was new and necessary. Sometimes, late at night, I still wondered who I might have been if things had been different, if support had come freely, if encouragement hadn't been rationed. But the thought no longer hurt. Because the woman I became wasn't a compromise. She was an evolution. I stopped asking whether I was too much. The better question was always this: too much for whom? Not everyone deserves access to you at full volume. Not everyone earns proximity. Boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. As the years moved forward, my life stopped being a reaction to pain and started becoming a reflection of intention. I chose where I lived, who I loved, what I built, and what I left untouched. There was no grand moment where everything clicked into place. Just a steady alignment. Day after day. Decision after decision. I no longer live to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding me. I live in integrity with myself. That integrity is quiet, but it is unbreakable. And for the first time in my life, the future doesn't feel heavy. It feels open. There came a day when my past stopped introducing itself before I did. No whispered context, no careful summaries, no one leaning in to ask, isn't she the one who? I was simply there. Present, whole, unexplained. It happened gradually, the way most real changes do. One meeting where my last name meant nothing. One dinner where my silence wasn't misread. One collaboration where trust was assumed, not tested. I hadn't realized how exhausting it was to be pre-known. To be anticipated. To be framed before I spoke. Now, when people asked about my work, they asked about the work. Not the fallout, not the family, not the spectacle. That felt like arrival. I stopped giving keynote speeches about resilience. I'd said what I needed to say. Repetition began to feel like performance, and I had no interest in turning my wounds into a brand. Instead, I listened. I sat in rooms where younger founders talked about burnout like it was a personal failure, where women apologized before disagreeing, where brilliance still tried to make itself palatable. I didn't interrupt. I waited. Then I asked better questions. What would you do if you didn't need permission? What are you protecting by staying quiet? Who benefits from your hesitation? The answers were always the same. Not them. One evening, while walking home through a quiet street, I felt something unfamiliar. Lightness. Not my family. Not my past. Not the version of me that had survived by shrinking. I wasn't proving. I was being. The company entered a new phase, leadership distributed, systems resilient enough to outlast me. That mattered more than control. I had seen what happens when institutions center ego instead of values. I refused to recreate it. One of my team members once said, "You don't lead like someone who's afraid of being replaced." I smiled. "That's because I'm not," I said. "If I'm irreplaceable, I've failed." That mindset confused people used to hoarding power. It attracted people who understood stewardship. My relationship with success changed too. I stopped chasing expansion for its own sake, stopped equating growth with worth. Some quarters were quieter, some decisions were conservative. I slept better. At night, I sometimes thought of my family, not with longing, not with anger. With distance. Distance is not indifference. It's discernment. I wish them well in the way you wish well to people. You no longer need to convince. Without urgency. Without expectation. Without self-betrayal. If they ever meet me again, they will meet someone they don't recognize. Not because I changed into something unfamiliar, but because I finally became myself. I no longer negotiate my presence. I don't explain my boundaries. I don't soften truths to make them easier to digest. I offer respect. I expect it back. That reciprocity is non-negotiable. The story people tell about me will keep evolving. That's fine. Stories are reflections of the teller, not the subject. What matters is this. I wake up aligned. I move through the world unafraid of my own voice. I build with intention. I rest without guilt. I love without shrinking. And when I stand alone, it no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like ground. Solid. Earned. Mine. There is a quiet moment that comes after everything important has already been decided. Not a climax, not an ending, just a settling. That is where I live now. My days are no longer defined by what I'm escaping or proving. They're shaped by what I choose to tend to. Work that matters. People who listen. Silence that doesn't demand explanation. I used to think strength looked like endurance. Staying, absorbing, smiling through erasure. I was wrong. Strength is discernment. Knowing when to walk away without theatrics. Knowing when to stay without surrendering yourself. Knowing that not every loss is a failure, and not every victory needs witnesses. Neural thread continues to exist in the world, quietly doing what it was always meant to do. Saving time. Saving lives. Making space for earlier answers where there used to be none. I no longer hover over it. I trust what I built. That trust extends inward too. I trust my instincts now, the subtle ones, the ones that don't shout, the ones I used to ignore because they didn't align with someone else's comfort. I trust the pause. I trust the no. I trust the silence that follows a truth spoken cleanly. Sometimes people still ask how it feels to have one. I tell them I didn't win anything. I stopped losing myself. That distinction matters. There are no dramatic reconciliations waiting in the wings, no final speeches, no letters that change everything. Life didn't wrap itself into a neat conclusion. It simply moved forward. So did I. If my family ever reads this, they won't recognize the girl they thought they knew, not because she disappeared, but because she survived becoming visible. And if someone else reads this and feels something stir, something familiar and unnamed, I hope they understand this. You are not difficult. You are not disloyal. You are not ungrateful for wanting room to breathe. You are allowed to choose yourself without turning it into a spectacle. You are allowed to leave without burning everything behind you. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't require constant justification. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about refusal. Refusal to be erased. Refusal to be managed. Refusal to shrink for the sake of peace that only existed for others. I didn't become fearless. I became honest. And honesty, I've learned, is enough. This is where the story ends. Not with applause, but with certainty. I am here. I am whole. And I am no longer asking for permission.